separate directors and so forth for the different levels of security is actually not an advantage as such, because it leads to a lot of inefficiency and so forth. So having different levels within the same hospital is a much better way, I think, to manage things, and that is what, for example, the Dutch system, which also has a very long history of forensic services, does, and in Germany as well, places do, and that has the advantage that it's within the same treatment approach, it's the same director, it allows a relatively flexible, fast move from one ward to the other without having to wait potentially for a long time, without having potentially arguments between treatment approaches. So if something of different levels of security or restrictiveness even could be implemented in the same hospital, I think that would be a better way of doing things.
Mona, you had a question?
I was just, I was asking Professor Douglas, thank you for your lecture. This meeting is quite rare in the fact that we have the author and we have the implementers, and a meeting like this would not happen a lot. So once we finish the translation and it's approved, what are the precautions that you'd caution us against, especially when we're first using the HCR, that take care of overdiagnosing, take care of anything else? What are the precautions that we need to take care of?
That's a great question. I think I can give you some initial thoughts about that based on my observations of other systems that have implemented it. I think it would require a longer dialogue, which I'm happy to talk to your group about. I would caution against thinking that the mere fact that you train a group of people to use the HR20 or anything, that they're actually going to use it by mere virtue of having been trained. So I think you should have a plan in place to, if you train a group of clinicians at a hospital, that's one step. There's steps before that, such as raising awareness, a gentle introduction to the idea of, say, structured violence risk assessment, making sure that people understand that this approach is not intended to take their jobs away. It's actually, it values professional judgment.
Yes.
This approach cannot be used without the expertise of the people using it. I like to give the example, and I talked about it with our group in the training, about pilots who fly airplanes. And do you remember when that plane landed on the Hudson River in New York? So it took 69 seconds after takeoff for it to hit a flock of birds and lose both engines. And the control tower said, oh, divert to this runway over here. Pilot said, no, can't do that. Gonna land in the river. In that 69 seconds, the co-pilot took a manual out and read through, what do you do if you lose your engines? What do you do if you need to land on water? And they did what they needed to do, and they landed on water, and nobody died, and it was actually quite amazing. So that was professional expertise within a structure. So people really have to know that their professional expertise is still valued. So having a pre-plan in place, even before the training, and then identifying what is often referred to in the implementation world. There's a whole implementation science literature out there. How to successfully implement tools, measures, procedures, is identifying local champions. So within a unit or a ward or a hospital or a service, try to identify a small number of people who are well respected by administration and by their peers, and who can advocate for the use and adoption of whatever it is you want them to use or adopt. So valuing people's professionalism, preparing for it in a way that people realize this is actually going to help them do their jobs and help them help patients, which is why we're all in this field, right? And then afterwards, post-training, people need the opportunity to practice. So they need to be able to have the time to further their skill base. So in training, you learn how to do something like the HR20. Having some practice cases can certainly help out. And having kind of a gradual implementation of it so that people become comfortable with it, and it's not that it's just kind of dropped on them. I've seen it work really well in many large systems. I've also seen it not work very well. Tends not to work very well, and this is not just the HCR20, the other risk assessment instruments, personality measures, whatever the case might be, when it's kind of like, it's perceived by the staff as, well, here's somebody coming in telling me how to do my job. People might fill it out and then put the piece of paper on the shelf and ignore it. Right? So I think there's, looking at the implementation science, there's a lot of kind of proven methods and techniques to help out.
So I'd like to highlight that the local champions were already chosen by the General Secretary of Mental Health, and they are being trained for 3 consecutive days. So just consider yourself the local champions for the upcoming era.
Okay, we'll have one last question from Dr. Hisham Rami, and then we'll ask Dr. Samar to close the session.
Can we close the translation and speak only in Arabic? Our visitors should not listen to what I'm saying. السؤال موجه للدكتوره منى بس. انا معجب بقدره حضرتك على ترجمه ال 130 صفحه الى اللغه العربيه ومعرفتي بكفاءه حضرتك في اللغه الانجليزيه وليس العربيه.
We're a team of 9 people.
لا في 8 بيساعدوها، هي اللي هتعمل الانجليزي مش العربي. هي هتعمل الانجليزي مش العربي. سمر؟
Okay, I'd like to finally thank you all for being here today. I want to thank specifically Professor Dr. Tariq for leaving his clinic today and being with us, and all the psychotic patients, he said they have my address now, so they'll be coming to pay me a visit tonight. Thank you, Professor Menon, for being with us today. Without you, none of this would have happened, of course, so thank you for making this event happen. Thank you, Professor Hisham and Professor Hisham, for being with us today and for all your support over the past year. So thank you very much. Professor Dr. Dina, representing today our stakeholders and representing other universities that are with us and endorsing our LIFE project. So thank you very much to Cairo University for being with us on this project. You're always very supportive to us. Thank you very much for our guests. Thank you, Birgit, and thank you, Kevin, for being with us and for all the information we got from you over the past few days, and we'll still be with you for another day. Professor Dr. Asim, thank you very much for being with us today. Professor Dr. Asim is our mentor, and without him, nothing would move inside the university, so thank you very much for all your support and for being with us today. I want to invite you for just a small coffee break just before you leave.